Now, our next guest presenter is Chris Fendrick, who is a teacher of the visually impaired with the Kern High School District in Bakersfield, California. This is his 26th year with the Kern High School District, in which he has taught social studies, an administrator, and a special education teacher. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in history from Fresno State University in 1994, and a master's in education from the University of La Verne in 2004, and visual impairment from San Francisco State University in 2015. Chris is currently the chair of the Department of Rehab Blind Advisory Committee, and he also serves as a president of local California Blind Council, or California Council of the Blind, my apologies. He also is serving on the California Transcribers and Educators for the Blind and Visually Impaired Board of Directors beginning in 2019, and was elected vice president in 2021. In the fall of 2021, he was named a fellow in the American Foundation for the Blind Leadership Development Program. Chris resides in Bakersfield, California, with his wife and 3 children and guide dog, Maximus. Love that name, Maximus. An assortment of pets. In his free time, he advocates locally in the blindness, transportation, and civic issues. He enjoys assistive technology, swimming, reading. Last year, while he was directed to work elsewhere, Chris dedicated all his time in volunteerism and helping others with disabilities. So welcome, Chris. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Bobby. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Perfect. And I'm framed. I should be framed okay. I have, again, I appreciate that introduction, and that's my Eduardo. I appreciate you inviting me here, and Bobby for the introduction.
You're welcome.
And and so that was my conference bio. So I appreciate that, and indulge in your listening to all of those things that I'm busy with. So again, yeah. So happy to be here. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen real quick. I have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm low vision, so I have some vision due to retinitis pigmentosa, which is a hereditary disease in which slowly progresses. And hold on a sec. It's slowly taking my vision. And so it's
roles.
Let me switch over here.
Host attendee Zoom work Microsoft Edge. Boardwalk Cal HR presentation read only PowerPoint. Ready. Boardwalk Cal HR presentation read only PowerPoint. Question slide.
I'm using a screen reader called JAWS. Initially, I was going to
F5.
Going to
slide 1 dashboard blind advisory committee.
Basically silence my JAWS. But in our initial setup, I was like, Susan was, hey, just run it. It'll be an educational moment for everybody. And I'm like, well, yeah. And it would be great since I'm showing a PowerPoint slide presentation and I'm speaking on blindness. It makes perfect sense that my fellow blind and visually impaired compadres in the audience would be able to listen to my presentation as well. So if you hear some talking in the background, it is going pretty quick, but that's kind of how I listen to things, and so we get through the material. So
heading level 1 board blind advisory committee. Page down.
Next. Okay. What I wanted to do, Eduardo approached me about talking about the Blind Advisory Committee for the Department of Rehabilitation after our last quarterly meeting in November. And basically, we're a group of people, and I'm going to get to all the membership and all the background and details of what the BAC does in a few moments. But I kind of wanted to back up a little bit, because obviously from the title, we advise the department. We provide expertise from the field about why the department should be doing what it's doing for blind and visually impaired consumers. So, but I wanted to back up a little bit. And I wanted to ask some questions that you may have as managers and for Cal HR about hiring blind and visually impaired people, and who these people are that are walking through the door, and some questions that you might have. So,
heading level 1 questions. Bullet why hire workers who are blind or have low vision? As an employer, you want employees who are dedicated, reliable, and good problem solvers. You may worry about hiring a person who is blind or has low vision. Left (B/LV) right to join your workforce. Asking yourself: bullet left quote, will a blind individual be able to keep up with the workload? Right quote.
So there's a few questions. When that guy walks through, will he be able to keep up with the workflow?
Bullet left quote, will he or she be able to work effectively and efficiently? Left quote.
Will he be able to work efficiently? Probably.
Bullet left quote, what are my legal obligations when I employ a person with a disability? Right quote.
Well, we just touched on what are my legal obligations on employing a person with disability. So, and that was an excellent presentation previous to this. I really appreciated all of their insight in providing Office of Civil Rights perspective on hiring people with disabilities. And that LEAP program was new to me, and we'll definitely communicate that as I go forth in our community. So these are some questions that you may have in your mind of, should I hire a blind and visually impaired person? Because there aren't a whole lot of people coming through the door. And there's a lot of myths that come up, as well as even my own, I have a new boss, and I had to educate him on certain things that I need, or certain things on how I work and those kind of things. So
page down. Bullet left quote, what are my legal obligations when I employ a person with a disability? Right quote. Heading level 1 answers. Bullet blind and low vision individuals work in many fields. The problem solving skills and can do attitude B/LV people use to cope with their disability make.
Okay. So what I did, Mississippi State has a great program on workforce of the blind and visually impaired. And they put together a lot of these ideas and thoughts. And
heading level, bullet blind and low vision individuals work in many fields. The problem solving skills and can do attitude.
And the problem solving skills and the workarounds that they have are amazing. The creativity that a blind and visually impaired worker that brings to the workplace is amazing, because we're dealing with problems every day outside of the normal components of daily living.
Them tenacious employees who know how to think creatively about challenges they encounter.
Very creative.
Bullet B/LV people are eager to be given a chance and are dedicated employees who are less likely than other workers to leave their employer for another job.
They're very dedicated.
If your business struggles with staff turnover, a person who is B/LV can help bring stability to the work environment.
They bring stability to the workplace, especially if you have a lot of turnover and those kind of things. Learning the history and what's going on with the community and your organization, they provide that historical structure.
Bullet employees who are B/LV can use specialized equipment and techniques to accomplish most workplace tasks with some creative thinking and commitment. Many jobs can be adjusted to accommodate a person who is B/LV.
So we're going back to the reasonable accommodations. It's very important. Yes, if you have access, if the person that walks through the door and says, hey, I can do any job, most jobs, you're not going to drive a truck, you're not going to drive a forklift. But if you're a manager, if you're an analyst, if you're secretarial, if you're customer service, all those kind of things can be done with the use of a screen reader. And it's pretty seamless, especially if they have the correct training.
Page down. Heading level 1A testimony. Heading level 1A testimony.
Okay, so I wanted to show a quick video on a gentleman who works for Google, and kind of it's real about 3 or 4 minutes. So
link bullet https://youtube.enter.
Hopefully it.
Boardwalk Cal HR presentation -read-only PowerPoint. Question slide 2 of 18. Opening new tab. Loading page. Post it. Virtual PC cursor. Num log on. Still loading. Num log off. Use virtual PC cursor off. F.
Hopefully we get going. There we go.
Main region. F.
Travel to work
press ESC to exit full screen.
What I would say is kind of like
here's how Google's blind lawyer does his job-YouTube.
Running 10 miles before you even get to the start of the marathon. There's always a lot of dynamic objects moving. People moving throughout Penn Station, rushing to get where they're going. Their noses are in their phones. They're not looking at where they're going. So I have to compensate for all of that. You're always making split-second decisions about things that you have very little information about. So for someone who is visually impaired like me, who can't see, you have about a 4-foot radius of information that you can pick up with your cane. By the time I get to work, it's like I've had a full day already. My name is Jack Chen. I am currently a product counsel at Google. I've been working at Google now for about 6 years. I am like the quarterback or the general counsel for the product from a legal perspective. So anything that happens in the product in Chrome OS and Chromebooks, I'm responsible for figuring out what the legal risk is, how to navigate around it. It spans all kinds of areas of law, right? From trademarks to open source, to privacy, to litigation. So I get to put on lots of hats. I get to learn lots of different kinds of law, and I find that super interesting. So I am totally blind, and that means that I have no light perception whatsoever. I wasn't born that way, though when I was born I had some limited vision. When I was 16, I went for my last eye operation, where because of some hemorrhaging and some head movement during the operation, I lost the remaining sight. Most people will ask me, what's the most difficult thing about being a lawyer and being blind? And I'll be really honest, it's kind of hard for me to think about that now. I kind of say to myself, well, no, I don't really have a lot of challenges. I found ways to get around most of the things that are difficult. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of that, I use a couple of different types of technology to do my work. The main one is the screen reader, which you can think of as the computer reading back to you everything that comes onto the screen. On my laptop, I'll use it. On my phone, I'll use it. And even on the video conferencing systems that we use here, I'll use it. So I found a way to kind of get all the information I need to get by making the devices talk to me.
Hangouts, 8:45 a.m. now, Jack Chen, Bloomberg interview /
And one of the things that I do that to help the fact that it takes me longer is I turn the speed up on the speech just about as fast as it can go, just about as fast as a human could possibly understand it, to give myself some efficiency. Anything that's visual is a challenge. So redlining, for example, lawyers do, right? Redline. That's very difficult for me because the program that I use to read documents has to then read to you the content as well as read to you what's stricken through or what's underlined or what color it's in. So it gets very wordy and very difficult to read. But I found ways around that. I might, in a negotiation, write up all my red lines in a document, have it at my fingertips so that I could refer to it, and not actually even have to go to the document as I'm negotiating a deal. I've also found that living kind of my daily life has been really useful and helpful for me to counsel my clients. I'm able to help them because a lot of times when you try to find creative solutions, you also run into roadblocks. That's the kind of thing I've done my whole life. I'd love someday to be able to put the skills that I've learned together and lead a larger and more formal team, some kind of general counsel role potentially.
Okay, so we can see from this testimony that he's got a few obstacles. He gets to work on his own. He is able to, let me go back to my presentation.
Boardwalk Cal HR presentation -read-only -PowerPoint. Ready.
He's
Boardwalk.
able to use his, he cranks up the speech. A good friend of mine recommends that we listen, that our speech be able to listen to 600 words a minute. Much faster than sighted can read. It's almost like speed reading for the blind. I'm not quite there yet with 600 words a minute, but I do know some people that really crank up their screen reader to help them. Is my volume still coming through, Eduardo and Bobby?
Yes,
Okay.
Coming through fine.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And my presentation, I think, is
F5.
there it goes.
Slide notes. Slide notes.
Oh.
Slide notes. Slide notes.
And let me switch to the next.
Page down. Heading level 1 hurdles to blindness.
Okay.
Full at 70% unemployment rate of the heading level 1.
Okay, so we've seen, that we can, there's questions and there are answers. We've seen that people can do it with the right accommodations and with the right devices and with the right training. We don't just get there automatically. If you've been totally blind all your life, there's a whole process that I'm going to talk about here in a second. Or if you're adventitiously blind like myself, where I went blind later in life, you have a different levels of compensation. So just a few things that are some hurdles to keep in mind that blind and visually impaired workers are having to deal with, or people.
Well, it's 70% unemployment rate of the blind.
So there's 70% unemployment of the blind, and we're really trying to close that gap through these types of presentations and us opening up this dialogue. Hopefully, someone will walk through your door to bring down that unemployment rate.
Well, implicit bias of white cane in the room.
There's implicit bias that we're dealing with.
Well, 88% of information is from visual incidental learning.
88%. So when you're blind, or when you're sighted, 88% of all information is learned incidentally, basically through observation. And so that's a big hurdle that we as teachers of the visually impaired have to work through, and trainers have to work through. So just having to keep that in mind, so we have very direct skill sets that we have to teach.
Well, this is through observation and non-direct instruction. Well, adults new to blindness and students need to access expanded core skill sets for blind and visually impaired.
Okay, and so in that special training, we have this thing in our community called the expanded core curriculum, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute.
Well, transportation to workplace.
And some obstacles are transportation. I take paratransit each morning. That means a bus comes to my house at 6:40 and they come for me at 4 o'clock. And there's been, this community doesn't have very good public transportation, but the paratransit does satisfy that. I would love to live in the Bay Area or something, or even Sacramento, to where you could get to and from on mini rail, light rail, those kind of things. So that's just one of the obstacles.
Fully reasonable and timely reasonable accommodations.
Oh, there's the RA thing again, reasonable accommodations. So again, I think you're going to hear more about that from the Civil Rights Department.
Bullet.
Okay, let me go
page down.
Okay.
Heading level 1, expanded
core. There's 9 areas of the expanded core that blind and visually impaired people need to be trained in. The first one's
compensatory skills.
Compensatory skills, basically reading and writing, learning to listen, Braille instruction, those types of things, or Braille reading.
Orientation and mobility.
Orientation mobility, that's using the white cane, using your guide dog, using navigating the workplace. Once you have good orientation mobility, there are specific certified trainers that work with blind and visually impaired people. They can come to your workplace. They set up the cubicle. They show them where the restrooms are and all those kind of things. I even know of a local person who's worked with an orientation mobility specialist at an Amazon distribution center, and they've had to work around some of those very busy areas.
Social interaction.
They teach social interaction, much like this, using eye contact, communicating well, having good soft skills, and all those kind of things.
Independent living skills. Independent
living, not necessarily workplace, but yeah, it is workplace if you are, having good etiquette or good grooming techniques for home, and learning to dress yourself correctly, have the right match clothes, all those kind of things.
Recreation and leisure.
Recreation and leisure, very important for all of us to be able to do that. Getting ready to head up for Ski for Light here in February with all this snow that we're getting.
Sensory efficiency.
Sensory efficiency, basically using your audio skills well.
Assistive left brain, access right brain technology.
Access or assistive technology is generally the term that you hear, but we also call it access technology, which is being able to access what is ever on the PC. And these days, all of the computer work we do with a screen reader like JAWS or Fusion or NVDA, non-visual display adaptation, or access, and that's actually a free program. But JAWS is the industry standard when it comes to screen reading and those kind of things. So good training in that is very helpful.
Career education.
And then career education, just like what you talked about. One thing I would talk to a potential employee, talk about the LEAP program, talk about what careers are available at the state, what jobs can you do, or what's out there. I think that's huge that I'm going to start talking about as we move forward.
Page down. Self-determination. Heading level 1, the Blind Advisory Committee.
Okay, so circling back to the Blind Advisory Committee. So I say all that other stuff because basically we are a linkage for all of those things that the blind and visually impaired community has to deal with, and we speak for that community to the department. Joe Xavier, wonderful leader of the department, and also their specialized services division, which coordinates all of the programs for the blind and visually impaired and deaf of hard of hearing. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the way the Blind Advisory Committee came about and the SSD came about during the Wilson administration, it's been around for a while, but was put in a statute with a little bit more teeth, a little bit more advisory role formality. And we basically meet quarterly. And
Statute 40 the BAC is established pursuant to Section 19,098.5 of the Welfare and Institutions Code, which mandates that the Director of Rehabilitation shall establish the Blind Advisory Committee. Purpose: the Blind Advisory Committee (BAC) provides expert advice to the Department of Rehabilitation (right) on means to increase competitive employment, enlarge economic opportunities, enhance independence and self-sufficiency, and methods of improving services for persons who are blind or visually impaired. Economic opportunities, enhance independence and self-sufficiency, and methods of improving services for persons who are blind or visually impaired.
So we are the sounding board for the community to say, hey, we need to do this better, do that better. And it's definitely a wonderful partnership. At first, when I first joined the Blind Advisory Committee, I wasn't sure if it was just kind of listen and learn and move on. And we don't rubber stamp anything. We don't, but we listen to and advise. And it is definitely a cooperative process. The department does listen to us. They do take our recommendations to heart. And I believe we've effected a lot of good change.
Page down. Economic opportunities, enhance independence and self-sufficiency. Slide 8 membership.
Okay, so the membership of the committee. So what's consisted of to provide equity across the for the committee. There's 13 members. There's 2 members that are selected or nominated from the California Council of the Blind, 2 from the National Federation of the Blind, California.
Heading level 1 members, Blind and Visually Impaired California resident, up to 13 members from the Blind, 2 members from National, 2 current consumers, 1 education for K-12 BVI youth.
1 educator, which is what I represent, working with K-12 students. I bring that perspective. I think the previous member for education was Stuart Wittenstein, which was the CSB, or California School for the Blind superintendent.
1 California Vendors Policy Committee.
Then there's 1 for the California vendors.
2 service providers - agencies that serve the blind.
2 service providers.
3 at-large members.
And then 3 at-large members, which sometimes can be
3 at-large members.
Are students and just other members out in the public that receive Department of Rehab services.
Page down. Public comment always welcome. Slide 9 BAC agenda. Heading level 1 BAC agenda. So
typically meetings are, like I said, held quarterly, and they are pretty much the morning. They run pretty much 9 to 4:15. In the morning session, we deal with hot topics that are going on with the department and in blind field services. We listen to presentations, new initiatives, and provide more time to hear from the department on specific, maybe a deeper dive into their programs or issues that are going on.
Bullet work is a bullet partnership of putting the consumer agenda items : bullet full reports on hot topics in the field morning.
And that's one other thing I want to point out is that we always keep the consumer first. It's always about what's best for our consumers, how we get them to work, how we provide them with their accommodations and provide their skill sets and trainings.
SSD director and managers report in PM. Public comment always welcome.
So in the afternoon, the directorate, which is Joe Xavier and Andy Mudrick, come in and talk about national, state, and the bigger window, the 35,000 foot viewpoint of what's going on there. And then they will entertain also more specific or controversial questions in the afternoon for their presentation.
Public comment always welcome.
And then we always provide then the SSD director comes in. The acting director right now is Peter Dawson. His assistant is Michael Thomas, and we hear from their different divisions, which I'll talk about here in a second, what the different divisions in the Department of Rehab SSD division.
Public comment always welcome. Public comment always welcome.
And that last one, where public comment is always welcome. After each agenda item, we always open up the floor for the public, because if we don't know about something to bring each of the committee members to bring to the meeting, a lot of times they can call in, and now with how Zoom has just revolutionized the world these days, people can Zoom in for our meetings. So
page down. Bullet public comment always welcome. Heading level 1 achievements. Bullet always addressing the needs of the consumers.
Okay, so
heading level 1 achievements.
some achievements just recently.
Bullet last summer held 2 task force committees address.
We held just recently this last year, we held 2 task force. Actually, we tackled 3 major issues. We're bringing Title IX, which is, we all know what Title IX of sexual harassment and those kind of things, which there were policies in place, but not a whole lot of policies to protect the consumers. That's a very murky subject, but we've made a lot and a deeper dive, which I'm not going to present here, but we made a lot of inroads for recommendations that Door Legal is working on, and we're looking forward to great opportunities for protection of all consumers.
Bullet Title IX compliance of Bullet Cal-ATS vendor procurement policy.
The second one, the task force, we did, there was some issues with conflict of interest and perceptions of who's selling what and who's providing what, if it's best for the consumer. And we hashed out some good policy there as well. Bullet
updated conflict of interest policy. Bullet micro-market policies of inaccessible devices.
We always are concerned about micro markets. If you don't know what those are, they're the little markets within office buildings, those kind of things, which are self-service. Many are inaccessible, but we're working through to get more accessible devices. Actually, McDonald's has partnered with Freedom Scientific to provide accessible kiosks, which we're hoping that this will be launched with micro markets for some of our other programs.
Bullet working to bring text-to-speech to vending machines and kiosks. Bullet continued use of independent service providers as needed.
Due to AB5, there were some issues with independent service providers as contractors and those kind of things. And so there was a snafu, if you will, with independent service providers being recommended. And those are like people that do orientation mobility training, maybe assistive technology training on their own and not working through a specific agency. And there's various needs, and without going into all the details of that, but there was the risk of that, we losing that, and through a lot of conversation and robust discussions on the importance of keeping independent service providers, they've maintained a really good ear from the community and are drafting and have some good policies that are going to move forward into 2022. So those are some really nice achievements that we've seen in just this last year.
Page down. Page down.
How am I doing
Slide
on
11
time,
Dashboard Specialized Services Division. Slide 12 Blind Field Services.
10:35. Okay. A few more minutes, Bobby?
Sure.
Absolutely. Go right ahead, Chris. No
Okay.
problem.
Okay, great. Thanks. I just want to talk about the different divisions. I'm not going to go too deep into each of these, the divisions of the programs that are overseen by the Specialized Services Division that the BAC oversees. But the first one is Blind Field Services. They have their own district in the Department of Rehab, in which, because it's such a specific and severe disability, outside of the other 12 districts, they're their own district, and they can actually channel students and consumers towards that. So because they're the experts in what they know about within the blind world, and know what the vendors and programs to refer people to and everything. So I'm going to listen to this slide real quick and jump in if I think of something else that I'm not covering in this slide.
Heading level 1 Blind Field Services. Bullet, the goal of Blind Field Services is to bullet increase employment outcomes and enhance the independence and self-sufficiency for consumers in California who are blind and visually impaired through a team of counselors and supervisors who understand the barriers faced in achieving meaningful employment and independent living. Bullet Blind Field Services offers unique services to Door consumers and employers. Door consumers working with a Blind Field Services counselor may receive all general vocational rehabilitation services with the addition of vision loss counseling. Employers may receive services and training specifically tailored for hiring and creating a successful work environment for individuals with blindness or visual impairment. For hiring and creating a successful work environment for individuals with blindness or visual impairment.
Okay.
Page down.
The next
Slide 13
one
community rehabilitation programs.
is community rehabilitation.
Heading level 1 community rehabilitation programs.
That slide's out of order. Community rehabilitation programs are programs that are typically local in nature, and let's say,
SF Lighthouse for the blind and visually impaired.
North Bay Area has San Francisco Lighthouse.
Wayfinding families.
We have Wayfinders down in Southern California and Northern California, which they support.
Davidson Program for
the
Independence.
Davidson Program for Independence. That's in Los Angeles.
Hadlin Program for Independence.
Program, which is an apartment living program, more independent. That is in San Pablo, up in Bay Area near Berkeley.
Other community supports. Vista Center, San Jose, Palo Alto.
There's some other ones. Vista Center, which is over in the South Bay, San Jose, Palo Alto.
Sacramento Society for the Blind.
And then Sacramento Society for the Blind has a good Northern California presence.
Center on Vision Enhancement, Merced, Cal.
And then Cove in Merced.
Valley Center for the Blind, Fresno and Bakersfield.
Valley Center for the Blind and serves the Central and South Valley of San Joaquin.
Independent service providers left for NISPS right.
And then we talked about independent service providers, which contract with the department on their own.
Page down. Bullet.
Another program that is overseen by SSD, the Specialized Services Division, is the Business Enterprise Program, which helps people get employed as to work in the food industry and those kind of things. And I'll just read through this slide for our people that.
Business Enterprises Program creates opportunities for qualified door consumers who are legally blind to become independent business owners in the food service industry. Business Enterprises Program provides classroom and operational skills training with an emphasis in food service management, quality, customer service, menu planning, health and safety, and merchandising. In California, Business Enterprises Program vendors earn an average monthly income of $3,700. The program supports 90 business owners, equating to 550 food service positions at approximately 250 sites statewide. The Business Enterprises Program offers participants the opportunity to achieve a dependable income and benefits such as health insurance, life insurance, and a sound retirement. The program was created through federal legislation, the Randolph-Shepard Act of 1936, which was enacted to provide blind persons with remunerative employment, enlarging the economic opportunities of the blind, and stimulating the blind to greater efforts in striving to make themselves self-supporting. The federal and state statutes governing this program provide a priority for blind vendors to operate food service facilities in federal and state government buildings. County and city buildings are not included in this priority, but many county and city governments cooperate with the Business Enterprises Program by making their food service facilities available to the vendors in the program. So
if you're back in the office, state workers, check out your BEP program and tell them thank you for doing a great job. And
page down.
That was part of that.
Heading Level 1 Orientation Center for the Blind.
Okay, so I mentioned the community resource partners like San Francisco Lighthouse and Hatlin and Wayfinders down in Southern California. The department also has their own center for training. I talked about all those 9 areas of expanded core curriculum. The Orientation Center for the Blind in Albany, overseen by Sue Palbath, has a program in which they train people in all of those specific things. They train them in Braille, they train them in assistive technology, orientation mobility, independent living. It used to be a 6 to 9 month program. It's now a 12-week program, and they've seen incredible growth of training those people.
The Orientation Center for the Blind is a well operated training facility in Albany. CA that assists job seekers from page down.
The next one.
Visually impaired and blind to adjust to their vision loss and acquire the skills and tools necessary to pursue competitive integrated employment. A specialized. Slide 16 student services.
Okay. We also, with the passage of WIOA, we always had student services, but we are provide from 16 to 24-year-olds. We can even start at 14. The department servicing students to provide workplace training at their workplaces, at schools, Saturday work, through different community-based trainings, internships, apprenticeships, and those kind of things through the department.
Page down. Heading Level 1 Student Services. Slide heading Level 1 Career Counseling. Information and
Then they also offer career counseling, again, referrals, hopefully the LEAP program and other state programs. And I'm not going to read the whole slide since we're kind of short on time now.
Page down. Slide 18.
I was planning on having much more resources. I'm going to build this up a little bit more for some other programs I'm going to present to as well. But if you like, after I build up the resources page a little bit more, I would be happy to send it out through SDAC and you guys to your community partners and share a little bit more information in case you want to look at things a little deeper. I also want to point out there's a couple other good websites and things. American Printing House for the Blind, through their Career Connect program, is really helping to build and fill in some of the gaps for blind and visually impaired workers. They're building a great resource over there. And I'm sure you guys are already aware of the Job Accessibility Network, which helps guide reasonable accommodations, those kind of things. So with that, I thank you again for this opportunity to speak speak with you guys, and I will unshare my screen and go back in case anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. That was very informative. This is Eduardo.
Here's how Google's blind lawyer does his meeting controls.
One sec. Let me go back.
Meeting controls. Alt S.
So, Chris, I have, I'll ask the first question if it's okay. So the JAWS, to me, that seems really, really, really fast. I have to ask how long it took for you to get adjusted to that speed of screen.
Yeah, good question. And I probably could have slowed it down for everybody.
It's fine.
It's a work in progress. It's taken me, and since my vision has been decreasing, especially the last 10, 12 years, about 3 years.
Okay.
I've adapted because I still use my residual vision somewhat I use the magnification, those kind of things, but I fatigue really fast. So if I need to read a long document or something, I'll use the JAWS program or even my voiceover on my iOS device.
Okay, because it sounds really effective. It's just, I think to the rest of us who've never used JAWS, it sounds really fast, like wow. But if it works for you, then it's perfect. But to me, like, wow, that's going to take me a while to learn that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then I was going to ask, I know you had mentioned trying to overcome like obstacles with like eye contact. That's another obstacle that I've had, trying to overcome at work and, and then just in life in general. How do you overcome that obstacle? Because it's been my experience in life that like, if someone doesn't know that you have a vision problem, and then you're not making eye contact with them, they think you're being disrespectful, or they think you're not listening to them, or whatever misconception people have. How do you overcome that?
You know what? I dealt with that the other day. I walked into our school office where my principal's at and stuff. He was walking in and walking out, and I had to stop and mentally force myself to look where he's speaking from, and try to make at least pointing my face up towards him. Okay. I have my students do the same thing. My students have their head down like this. I'm like, stop staring at the keyboard. They're like, I'm not staring at the keyboard. But I said, you got to put your head up, look forward. And you really have to mentally force yourself to do that, because it really is easy to kind of to cast your eye. I'm moving my eyes to my left. You can kind of look to your left, and even speaking with my wife, sometimes I don't look at her, but I have to force myself to, look over at her to talk. And so it's just really deliberate. That was the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
You have to very deliberately think about it.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Chris? Any questions out there?
This is Bobby. I just have one quick question. This is more of my curiosity, may or may not add any knowledge value to anyone. So my apologies in advance. One thing I observed when you were
kind of dropped off, Bobby.
Chris?
Oh, there. Okay, my headphones shut off. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys. Lovely Zoom. Gotta love Zoom.
Okay. No problem. I'm going to get right to my question. My question is more of a curiosity, and that is, I noticed that the jaw is talking at a very high rate of speed. And if you're interacting over the phone or through Zoom or anything else, you also have to listen to another person while you're communicating. How do you balance that? I mean, it must require a real special skill, which I certainly couldn't do that. So how do you juggle two different input at the same time?
And that was my biggest worry and my challenge when putting this presentation together, because it takes a lot of training to do that, because there are ways you can put JAWS in one ear and then listen to the conversation in the other ear. And it's just it's like playing the piano. It's a learned skill to do that. And that was one reason why I wasn't going to have JAWS on, because I was worried about doing that exact hiccup. And I'm still learning that technique, if you couldn't tell already, because I was kind of stammering a little bit here and there. But yeah, it's a skill set. And there's some guys, their customer service, they work for airlines, and they'll have JAWS in one ear and talking to the customer, and they have that skill to be able to build it. It's just like I said, playing the piano.
Bobby, this is Susan. Chris, can you guys hear me now? I'm sorry, I've been having technical difficulties as well. I had to jump off for a second. I know at the beginning of this, I was saying, well, leave it on. And what was interesting for me is it was uncomfortable at first because I had to listen to you talk and listen to the speech to text, the text to speech. But I think it was a really great example of something that we, as people who are not, those of us that are not blind or visually impaired, would not think about the skill set. I also saw how that you were doing. I was like, when I was listening, you were doing what I do in my head. You were listening through what was being spoken, and then you were translating that into the summary that you said. Did you lose me, Bobby?
Yeah, I got you now. Yeah.
Okay. But anyways, okay. I think it was a great. It was a great learning tool for me. I really appreciated you sharing it that way.
Well, good. And I'm always open to learning new presentations and those kind of things. So I appreciate that feedback, Susan. I hope it didn't make any other people too uncomfortable.
No.
We have another question from Scott Richmond. Scott is asking, are there any resources or services you might recommend for a person with both visual and hearing limitations?
I would definitely hook up, with the Department of Rehab. And there's a wonderful program called Helen Keller Institute, and it's back in New York. And they also have a regional people that will come out. There's a Pacific region. They're based in San Diego, but they have people all over California that contract with the department, and Helen Keller program, which is specifically to the deaf and hard of hearing community. I mean, the deaf-blind population. Excuse me.
Do we have any other questions for Chris?
I was going to give it a breath and see if anybody else, but I actually had another question for Chris. This is Susan.
Sure, Susan.
So as you were giving your presentation, by the way, we did have people in the comments asking if you can share that presentation with us. And I think the SDAC has figured out a way to distribute those presentations. And people were also asking for your contact information.
Okay.
So I'm hoping you'll pass that on to Bobby for the group.
Do you want me to, I can put it in the chat right now.
Sure.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Chat.
Go ahead with your question.
So the question I had was, I noticed you saying in the presentation that there's a statute. Actually, I have two questions. The first thing was about the statute for the Department of Rehab to have a committee for blind and visually impaired. Do you know, is that the only disability where there's a statute like that? Does the DOR have other committees?
They have a deaf and hard of hearing committee. I think they just started a traumatic brain injury committee. And I think and there's the State Rehabilitation Council, which is the cross disability organization. They have
so much. There are other committees for other disabilities.
Yes, there are. Yep.
Then my second question was about, actually, and it looks like we have another question in the chat that got missed while I was out. So we'll come to that in just a second. The second question was, in the activism communities, there's a lot of discussion about how we talk about our disabilities. I'm sorry?
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry, that was JAWS. I need to shut it off.
How we talk about our disabilities, and if we use identity first or person first language. I was hearing you use identity first language, which is, of course, as a person with a disability, I call myself a disabled person, not a person with a disability. From the blind and visually impaired community, are you okay with being called a person who is? Would you prefer a person who's blind or a blind person?
I'm still working out all of that. I think I call myself, and it's kind of an evolution, if you will. but I call myself, I'm blind and visually, I have a blind and visually impaired. I have blind with, if I can even talk, sorry, everybody, I'm embarrassing myself. I'm a person who is visually impaired.
You're not embarrassing yourself. You're showing us your humanity. That's the way I like to look at it. And I call myself as a person, a disabled person. I don't like I like to go identity first, but it's a question in the community. Bobby, could you read the question that I missed because I was out of?
Sure. No problem. What is the alternative reading program to JAWS, the free software you mentioned, Chris? This is a question from Ron.
It's called,
and yeah.
It's called NVDA, non-visual display access. I believe that's what it is.
Chris, that's so interesting. So I'm doing a software reconciliation. I just came across that. I didn't know that's what that was. I was thinking it was a misspelled NVDIA, which is a graphic software.
Oh yeah, NVIDIA. Yeah.
So.
Anyway, Chris, thank you so much.
NVDA without the I is an accessibility software.
Yes, it's a free download. It's open sourced. If employers are, I would really, if somebody's going to be employed as a blind and visually impaired person, they really should use. Well, I'm showing my bias. But I prefer just the JAWS program, but the NVDA is useful. So,
reading menus. Thank you again, Chris. This has been a really informative, educational, and enlightening presentation. We learned a lot. I learned that 600 words per minute is possible to get.
That's really fast.
Yeah, I'm probably at about 170. I think that's about 170 right there. So
really.
Yeah.
And it's recommended
to get to 20. So that's my hat off to you. Anyway, thank you very much. We appreciate this presentation. Please come back and see us soon, and happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays to everybody. And Eduardo, do you want me to send the presentation to you to send out, or do you want me to try to attach it here?
Well, I think what I'm going to do is when we post it on YouTube, it'll have the presentation on there. Yeah. But if you want to send that to me so we can send it out as an attachment as well, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We got to have you back.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Everybody have happy holidays.
You too.
And I put my personal email address in there. So.
Okay.
All right, guys. And I'm going to hang out. I'm going to shut off my video and listen to your next speaker.
Please.
Okay. Thank you.